The Dallas Cowboys made a ton of improvements on defense this offseason, but we'll tell you where they can still get better next.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back. I am your host, Mosher. He is Landon McCool, and today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. On today's show, we are taking a look at the Cowboys depth chart on defense as we get into OTAs and minicamp over the next month. We're going to look at some spots that could still be addressed. We're going to look at the safety room because I'm not entirely convinced that Malik Hooker is going to start, but we'll get to that later. Later, let's just start with a big picture overview. And if you're watching with us on YouTube right now, you can see our depth chart laid out here. How do you feel about this defense right now compared to how you felt about them in week one last year going into that matchup against Philadelphia?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Like kind of trying to view this through windows, right? Versus where we were at the beginning of the offseason and then going all the way back to where we were at the beginning of the season last year, right? And I think that this team feels more, it feels a little bit younger. It feels a little bit more on the rise, more on the up, right? Than where we were last year, it felt. I think last year at this point we were still reeling so hard from the Micah Parsons situation, and it just felt like we were trying to make do, like trying to we had just gotten all these assets from the trade, and we hadn't really fully invested them into things yet. We obviously we had Kenny Clark, but we didn't have Williams at that point yet. So I just feel like how we felt about this team and the direction it was headed a year ago, or not, a little bit in the future in a year ago, but week one of last season, I think was, man, this team feels like we just lost a major piece and we're on the arrows pointed down. Whereas now it feels like they tore the whole thing down, and now we're headed back up to see exactly, where the floor and ceiling of this defense is.
In hindsight, is always 2020. So it's I know it's hard to like wash out the 2025 season and just think about where we were at kind of going into that week one matchup. But there's a couple spots that I think are clearly better now than they were, at week one last year. And there's a couple spots that I think are worse. I think better. I think everybody knows how I felt about Kenneth Murray last year in the trade. You opened up the season with Kenneth Murray, Maurice Leafau, and Jack Sanborn as your top three linebackers. And while I think all of us were a little frustrated that they didn't do more at the linebacker position this year, I think the fact that you have a healthy, significantly healthier DeMarvion Overshown.
Yes.
You've got D Winters. We'll see what Barham can do. But even then, just having Winters and Overshown, I feel so much better about those two compared to Leafau and Kenneth Murray last year, because frankly, you and I just never bought into the Kenneth Murray hype.
Yeah, I mean, I just never understood the deal, the trade, and never understood why the Cowboys thought that was the answer at the position. He's been who he has been through this whole time, and will continue to be. I agree that it's an interesting position to kind of point to and say that you feel better about where it is, but the truth is that that's how bad the linebacker position was last year. And I think you're right to point out that the health of Overshown and the difference in his health between hoping he gets back to playing at some point and him getting an entire offseason for the first time to kind of go through it and develop a little bit. That's a huge difference. And again, like just another year with Shamar James. Yep. I feel better about Barham than I did about James going into the class last year, into the year last year. And I think you have a very defined role for Barham. I think that he's going to be able to fit in a very specific way. And honestly, I think that's also what's kind of helped with a lot of these positions is just it feels like the clarity of what these guys are doing at their positions is a lot just more clear
Yeah.
than it was last year. Even though this was kind of a rehash of a same sort of defense that we had played, in some sort of iteration the 4 previous years, there wasn't, it wasn't really clear who was always doing what, and I think that also was reflected on the field. And I think now we've changed defenses, and there's still a lot of clarity, not only in what they're saying that these guys are doing, but also who they're going out and getting and plugging into this defense that like it did last year.
Another position that I feel better about is the pass rusher, whether you want to call it defensive end or outside linebacker. Last year, going into week 1, you had Dante Fowler, Marshawn Nealon, Sam Williams, Donovan Ezeraku, and James Houston. Now you still have Houston, Sam Williams, and Ezeraku, and I would argue that their status hasn't really changed at all. The only thing with Ezeraku is I think he's a better run defender than you would have anticipated. Now he's more banged up now than he was at this time last year, but I think you feel pretty good about where he's at. Now you also have Rashan Gary and Malachi Lawrence basically replacing those two. Again, rest in peace to Marshawn Nealon, but to me, it's just a better room altogether with more talent at the top. Not where we want it to be yet to be, to be the elite unit, but I feel like it's certainly not worse.
No, and again, I think even down to guys like you mentioned, Sam Williams, probably given a more appropriate role where in this new year with this new contract, and also going back to a defense that's very similar to what he was doing in college. So, I mean, I think it's better all the way down there, right? So Ezeraku, another year under his belt. I think maybe some of that's being counterbalanced with the fact that he's recovering from his hip injury. So we'll see what kind of situation he's in. But you're right. Like having an experienced presence out there. I know that the Green Bay folks may not revere him very high, but having an experienced veteran pass rusher who is a very, very good athlete who could, at least be a key part of a pass rush in Rashan Gary, I think is such a severe improvement on what you had last year. It just raises the floor at the very least of the guys that you have.
Now, one spot that I'm not convinced that they're in a better spot than they were, again, on September 1st last year is cornerback. And the reason why is going into week 1, you had a Trayvon Diggs who was coming off an injury, but you were still expecting good cornerback play. You had, believe it or not, a healthier Deron Bland, and you also had Kyrie Elam. And it ended up not working out with Kyrie Elam, but there was a lot of positive buzz on Elam coming out of training camp, and you felt pretty good that those were going to be your top 3 corners, and you were just hoping that, they could find or, cobble together the safety spot. Whereas this year, you've got Bland, who is, again, coming off a major injury. You signed Kobe Durant, which we're very excited about. You do have a healthier Savon Ravel, so that's a good thing. But there's still a lot of question marks with Devin Moore. Can he stay healthy? Is Kalen Carson ever going to put it together? What can Bridges do for you? I think it could potentially be better than it was last year, but I'm just not convinced it's significantly upgraded from September 1st.
Well, I think the problem with last year, more than anything, I mean, beyond the way that the secondary played and ultimately Trayvon Diggs' lack of athleticism coming back from the injury, I think the problem is that it was a lot of fool's gold, and we kind of were hoping that Diggs would return to form and that Bland would be healthy enough to play, and I think neither were true, and so I think their solution this year is to throw numbers at the problem. And that's why I think it's a better situation than it was last year. On top of the fact that I think I just feel better about not resting on our laurels with having Trayvon Diggs as the answer at one of these cornerback spots. They actually have several different answers, including a free agent pickup, last year's 3rd round pick, another pick this year, all to kind of try to solve that potential problem. So, and on top of that, some guys that they brought back from last year that at least have some NFL experience. So I think at the very least, maybe there isn't the ceiling that we expected at the beginning of last year, but I think that in reality, and we'll see if we're similarly fooled this year like we were last year, but I think in reality, the floor is much higher than it was last year.
Yeah, and again, if you're counting the slot position as part of your cornerback room,
Well, yeah,
having Caleb Downs makes a huge difference. Now, that's cheating a little bit, but again, that's basically the role he's going to play. Or at least we think he's
yeah.
going to play. So for that reason, it is improved. But I want to talk about the defensive line because we didn't talk about defensive tackle. They were very strong at defensive tackle going into last year. We know they're better because of Quinnen Williams, but could they still add another body? We'll talk about that next. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. We can stream anything, order food minutes, and do everything from our phones. And yet somehow buying tickets to live events still feels way harder than it should be. Long lines, confusing checkouts, prices jumping at the last second. It shouldn't be that complicated, but that's why there's Game Time. It gives the advantage and back to the fans, and it makes getting tickets fast and simple. I was looking at tickets on Sunday for actually a Bills game that's going to be happening up here. I think it's in week 2 against the Lions, their home opener. Would love to go to see that new stadium. It's going to be a lot of fun. And it was awesome how quickly you can find awesome seats with Game Time. The seat views are unbelievable. You can check your exact view in the app before you buy. And Zone Deals is where you pick the section and you can save even more. 2 taps and you have great seats locked in. It's quick, it's easy, and it actually makes you want to go to more live events. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets to every type of event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off, and download the Game Time app today. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen every single day. Don't forget to check out the Everydayer Club where you can get ad-free episodes of the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Just go to lockedoncowboys.supercast.com to join the club. All right, Landon, let's talk about the defensive tackle room because it's one of the strongest parts of the team. You've got Quinnen Williams. You've got Kenny Clark. You also signed Jonathan Bullard. You signed Otito Igbana. Oh man, help me out.
Ogbani?
Yes, Bognani. I'm gonna get it right before the season starts.
I think it's Ogbani, if I'm not mistaken.
Ogbani. We'll get it right. I apologize. Double O. They also drafted LT Overton, who's going to kick inside a defensive tackle. You still have Jay Toia, but yet it feels like they need another pass rusher because I was looking back at the depth chart going into that Eagles game last year. You had Osa Digizua, you had Kenny Clark, you had Mozzie Smith, whatever. You had Solomon Thomas, you had Perrion Winfrey. It just felt like they had more bodies that could kind of get up the field and rush the passer. And that's my concern. Like if Quinnen Williams is off the field, who's going to provide that juice at defensive tackle?
Yeah, I mean, it's a legitimate question. I think that you feel good about having the strength that you need to play the run, to line up in a couple of different formations. I think LT Overton really helps unlock a lot of that. We've talked about that before. And I think Bullard, too, can play a couple different techniques as well, kind of from the 2-eye out to the 4. So if you need to.
By the way, I don't know if we talked about this enough, but I really like the Bullard signing just because he is a good run defender and he can give you 15 to 18 snaps up and down the line.
Yep.
But he's not a pass rusher at all.
Well, yeah, I mean, honestly, he's a veteran version of LT Overton, right?
Yes,
it's
exactly.
like, I mean, you're going to get really solid run defense. He's gonna help create a wall. He's going to be a useful player, but there's a reason he's not going to make a ton of money, and that's because he's not a pass rusher. He's a very specific cog for a very specific machine. And I do think that obviously that you're hoping to get the focus of your pass rush inside from Williams and Clark. I think there's also options, obviously, to kick someone like Gary inside and have him rush the passer as well. Maybe even Lawrence. I mean, he's a bigger guy. Maybe you teach him a little bit of that eventually. Probably not this year though. But I think that the point is that you probably do need one more answer as a pass rusher inside, and what's available to you either with a small, inexpensive trade or someone that you could sign in the free agency might be something that's worth investigating. And honestly, like even a trade for someone decent would make some sense simply because, you've got a guy that you don't know who's going to be here for too much longer in Kenny Clark. Williams is obviously a guy that they have long-term plans for, but you need to make sure that there's a Robin to his Batman, so he's not getting all the attention all the time. He did really well against double teams last year, but obviously he would be more effective if you were able to pull more and more away from him from the outside and from the inside. So yeah, I do agree with you. I think that could be something that they look at.
Well, it's just funny that we spent the last 5 years at this time every year looking at these defensive tackles that could come in and trying to find guys that can stop the run, whether that's Linval Joseph and Jonathan Hankins and Jordan Phillips. I mean, the list goes on and on. Just trying to cycle these guys in that could stop the run. Now they don't need that, right? Now they need the guy that they've had plenty of the last 5 years, is the guy that can kind of knife in and get you some pressures. And yeah, if he's not a great run defender, that's okay. You don't need to be playing him on first and second down. And honestly, there's just not very many of those guys out there because the NFL, they really, really value those guys that can be high pressure players on limited snaps. Whereas these guys that are rotational run defenders, there's plenty of them available right now in the open market.
Yeah, and let's be even more specific. We're talking about guys who can win the B gap specifically, because I think in this defense, you've got a lot of mug looks, you've got a lot of sim pressure stuff. You've got a 250-pound linebacker that you drafted this year that you could send through the A gap, and a guy like Overshown obviously could do that as well. Those are things that even the guys that you reduce down inside, they can win in the A gap against centers if they get lined up correctly. Yes. And they get one-on-one with the center. I think winning in the B gap is difficult. I think that's why you have to go get the kind of 280 plus pound guys to go win in there, because you're getting a full face of guard with the potential of the tackle getting some help as well. So yeah,
can I give you a name?
Yeah, please give me a name.
This guy's not going to be available, but they need their version of Malik Collins, who was a good player for the Cowboys, right? But the problem with Malik Collins is he's just not a very good run defender, but he's an awesome pass rusher. But if you put him on a defense that has great run defenders, he can be a really, really impactful player.
Yeah, give him an opportunity. Again, not a guy that you're starting necessarily, but he'll get a healthy number of snaps, especially as a pass rusher. And then if he could give you anything as a run defender, you put him in as part of a rotation. But honestly, maybe even a tweener type like Solomon Thomas, or like you said, Collins, a guy that's in that 280 to 295. It doesn't really fit a specific role. Maybe still on the street you can bring in, and he comes in and plays just a healthy 20 to 25 snaps for your defense.
Yeah, that guy's not going to be playing more than 400 snaps on the season unless you have a bunch of injuries. So it's a part-time player. I don't think it's going to be a big name guy like Cam Jordan. I mean, Cam Jordan would be a perfect fit, but I don't know if they're going to want to pay up for that because that guy's not going to play a lot of snaps. So it's kind of this fine balance of how do you get a talented player to fill that role without busting the budget? We'll see. Lynn, I want to talk about the secondary because safety is another spot that they've obviously made massive improvements in. But is it a lock that Malik Hooker will start in 2026? We'll get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Workplace chaos, deadline stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position that you have to fill is still sitting open. When the pressure's on and you need the right hire, this is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. Indeed sponsored jobs help you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for: skills, experience, location. So you're not just hoping that the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute that I've been talking to you, companies like yours have already made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So spend less time searching and more time interviewing the candidates who actually check all of your boxes. So just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now, and you can get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium status that it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. That is Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We are going over the Cowboys defensive depth chart, kind of going into the offseason here a little bit. And Landon, it's hard to find a spot that the Cowboys have upgraded more than the safety position. They signed Jalen Thompson in free agency, who a lot of people thought was either the best or second best free agent option at safety out there. They draft Caleb Downs, who is widely regarded as a top 5 player in this year's class. They also signed PJ Locke to a 1-year deal, I think worth about $4.5 million, who is a pretty good third or fourth safety. And right now he's on our depth chart at least, the fourth safety. But do you think it's a lot that Malik Hooker will start this year, given that he basically took a pay cut and he's not one of the 3 guys that Christian Parker brought in?
I don't think he's a lock to, God, we can't a lock. We keep using lock. I don't think he's necessarily a lock to be the starter. Obviously with the way that they paid PJ Locke and obviously with him taking a pay cut, but I also think that all 3 of a lot of these safeties are going to play a lot. I think that there's going to be a lot of 3 safety looks. I think honestly, if something happens to Downs, I wouldn't be shocked if it's Thompson who steps in and plays the nickel as opposed to one of the corners. So I just think that, there's part of the reason that we're talking about these guys as safeties is because they're lining up as nickelbacks like Downs, but they're playing kind of a safety position, right? Where they're just closer to the line of scrimmage. They're playing top down. It's that overhang position. It's very similar to the strong safety in a lot of different ways, right? So, yeah, I think there's probably going to be open competition, and PJ Locke is a guy that probably is more closer tied to the coaching staff than Hooker is.
Because Christian Parker had him in Denver when he was in Denver as well, so he's very, very familiar there.
But I think that either way, I think Hooker, I think Locke, I think Thompson, I think obviously Downs, I think Bell are all going to play a lot. And honestly, with the way how much they like guys like Alijah Clark, I wouldn't be shocked if they tried to keep him as well and try to use him this well with the split coverages that they're going to be using. I think that it gives them opportunity to play this type of player in a lot of different spots and give these kind of players a lot of opportunity.
Well, and that's it. I'm glad that you brought up Alijah Clark because he is listed on our depth chart here. I did not list. Sure, Julius Wood is on here as well. Markquese Bell is here. I just look at the depth chart at safety, and you've got 5 or 6 guys that you feel pretty good about. Malik Hooker's not making a ton of money this year, but you could trade him after June 1st and save about $4 million. He's also 30. I just wonder if there's a chance that they want to get younger and cheaper at that position, and they don't want to expose a guy like Alijah Clark, who plays on every special teams unit, who can play in the slot a little bit. I'm not trying to push Malik Hooker off this roster because I do think he's still a good player, but I wonder in your 2 safety looks, is it just going to be Thompson and Downs as the guys that are the primary snap getters? And if that's the case, maybe you don't need to spend that much money on Hooker.
I think if I'm looking at all these guys and their skill sets, you're still look. I mean, again, we've talked about this before. Ultimately, they're playing a lot of split field coverage stuff. You're going to see a lot of match coverage, some split field stuff. Ultimately, every team, just like every team runs a lot of zone, ultimately every team runs a lot of cover 3, right?
Yes.
Yes. And at the end of the day, Hooker is really good on the post at cover 3. That's what he does extremely well. So if he's still healthy, I still want him on my football team because I think he's a useful player who I want on the field. And safety is a position that, experience really matters. He's got a ton of it, and he's still athletic enough that he's not getting left in the dust. So to me, I think, yes, let's have the conversation about PJ Locke playing more, but all these guys are going to get a ton of opportunity to play. I don't think we should pinch pennies with with Hooker on a defense that we're wondering about talent.
All right, last thing before we go. The Cowboys generally keep 10 defensive backs. Let's run through them. We know the guys that are guaranteed to make the roster. Bland, Durant, Downs, Hooker. Well, we're just going to say Hooker right now. And Thompson, that's 5. Your top backups, PJ Locke, that's 6. Ravel, that is 7. Moore, that is 8. I would assume Markquese Bell is 9. And that leaves Kalen Carson, Reddy Stewart, Bridges, Elijah Clark, Julius Wood. Who do you think gets that last spot on the roster?
I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if they went a little bit long this year at defensive back. First of all, just because of who's their defensive coordinator this year. But if we are just going with 10 this year, I would say that to me, Clark makes a ton of sense. I mean, again, like I just think that he's the best player of the rest of those group. I wouldn't be shocked if we come back and Markquese Bridges has taken a huge jump. He got a lot of playing time last year. He has the athleticism. He has the body to do it. If he kind of has put it together, I wouldn't be shocked if he came out and surprised us. But I think based on the trajectories we saw last season, Elijah Clark to me is the name that I would choose.
The reason why I don't know if they can go super long on the defensive backs is because I think they're going to keep a lot of defensive tackles. Williams, Clark, Bullard, double low, that's 4. Overton's going to make the roster, that's 5. And we just mentioned we think they want another player that would give you 6 defensive linemen on top of at least 5 edge rushers. I mean, the Cowboys will probably keep about 25 total guys on defense, maybe 26, 10 secondary guys, 11 defensive linemen. It doesn't give you much room for the linebackers either.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, honestly, it's almost time to start having this conversation. But I wonder if the conversation doesn't include going a little bit shorter on the offense this year and trying to find a little bit more position crossover there on the offensive line. Maybe going a little bit shorter at wide receiver than you normally do.
Well, I think 5 is where we're going to get at receiver, and that goes back to our conversation yesterday, where that 5th receiver is going to have to be somebody that can play special teams. And I don't know outside of Turpin if they have that guy right now.
Interesting conversations coming up in the next few months on roster, that's for sure.
All right, that is it for today's show. We'd like to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. If you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get Locked On Cowboys ad-free plus members-only Discord access and so much more. Head over to lockedoncowboys.supercast.com to join the club. And for those of you on video, we can send you the first ever 24/7 national NBA YouTube channel. And on audio, make your second listen the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus _Mosher. We'll see you right back here tomorrow.